inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
Everyone carries a part of society on his shoulders. No one is relieved of his share of responsibility by others. And no one can find a safe way out for himself if society is sweeping toward total destruction. Therefore, everyone in his own interests must thrust himself vigorously into the intellectual battle. No one can stand aside with unconcern. The interest of everyone hangs on the result. Whether he chooses or not, every man is drawn into the great historical struggle, the decisive battle into which our epoch has plunged us. By Ludwig von Mises. I want to thank the commenter Hellet for bringing that comment, that's quote, to my attention. This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org, the weekly edition of Global Alert News for March 18th, 2017. This is a commercial-free one-hour news program. This show is broadcast on KQMS throughout Northern California on 1670 AM, 104.9 FM, 105.7 FM, and the Global Alert News Hour is also aired on the East Coast by the PRN Radio Network on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, along with numerous other websites that, thankfully, with my gratitude to them, post this news show to help us sound the alarm. Recordings of this show can be found on GeoEngineeringWatch.org under the Top Stories, Recent, and Radio sections and on the KQMS archives. A reminder, this show is not for those who want glossed over, spun, varnished news. This show is about putting out real frontline data, trying to connect the dots for people so that they can understand how critical and immediate our common crisis is on countless fronts. That's what this show is about. Before I get to headlines, I want to remind again, Orchard Nutrition in Redding, California has free materials for those that live in the Redding and Shasta County area. We do this to the degree that our finances allow, to present materials for people to pick up and please share with others. There are DVDs there that outline the climate engineering assault, the lethal vaccination assault, and the true story of 9/11 that completely contradicts the official narrative. And that story, that factual data is put out by almost 3,000 of the world's top architects and engineers. Don't you think you should listen to what they have to say? The official story is completely impossible based on the laws of physics. Find out what you don't know. Next library event in Redding will be on March 25th at 2:30 p.m. That's the Redding Library, Shasta County, Northern California. The documentary shown will be Making a Killing. It's a documentary film about the pharmaceutical industrial complex that reveals the profits they make and those who pay the price. I will be there for Q&A after that film is shown. There will be free materials there. Far too much breaking news to get through this week, as always, but let's try. Starting with this. Here's a headline. Above the law. U.S. invades Syria, kills 8 civilians. This is an invasion. Make no mistake about that. There is no permission by the Syrian government for the U.S. government to put troops in Syria. But our government does not care. They never have. They invade anyone they want, anytime they want. And people wonder why there's so much animosity toward our country. It's not about just waving your flag and claiming that you are patriotic. That's not patriotism. Patriotism is about finding out what your country is actually doing and not supporting those actions if they're wrong. Another headline on that front, U.S. military likely to send as many as 1,000 more ground troops into Syria, officials say. Again, invading a sovereign nation that was destabilized by our own government's actions and used as a premise to invade and topple more nations, going all the way back to Brzezinski's grand chessboard that I've gone over in so many shows. The layout by the global power structure, Western powers, NATO powers, to destabilize the Eurasian country in pursuit of resources. That's what it's about. Another headline. After destroying Cambodia, the U.S. wants the country to repay it for the bombs they dropped. Think about that headline. How totally absurd is that? That our country now wants the Cambodian government to pay us back for the bombs that we used to carpet bomb and destroy their country. Look it up, please. On all of these stories, do not believe me. Please just investigate. Another headline. Trump seeks defense boost for 2018, $30 billion supplemental for 2017. More money for the military-industrial complex while the planet and its life support systems implode. That's the reality we live in. Another headline. Compare the coverage of Mosul and East Aleppo and you realize the propaganda is as bad as in 2003 from that report. The same media that pushed you the Iraq WMD lie is now treating Mosul and Aleppo like they're nothing alike. This is the sort of mainstream media, corporate, military, industrial sponsored spin that we get. Lots of coverage about Aleppo and the humanitarian catastrophe that happened there. A catastrophe, as I stated already, that was ultimately created by the destabilization caused by our government, leading that back to climate engineering, the once in 1,000 year drought in Syria, once in 1,000 year drought in Iran, in Afghanistan, in Libya. Is this an accident? I'm just weaving this back into climate engineering. They use it to cut off the water, to stabilize the countries, topple them, and then the media focuses on things like Aleppo and blames it on the Syrian government when it's our government that has fueled, sponsored, funded the terrorists in Aleppo that helped to destabilize it after the NATO weather modification-induced drought. And then they cover Aleppo, but now they say nothing about Mosul, another country subjected to the same kind of drought, Iraq, and destabilized by our country. And now we have an absolute humanitarian cataclysm happening in Mosul, but no coverage of that. Because they can't blame somebody else for that, can they? That's what our media does. Nothing but spin. More headlines. Half the adults in the U.S. are chronically ill. Half. Statistically, from that report, according to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, as of 2012, half of all U.S. adults, 117 million people, have one or more chronic health conditions. Doesn't sound like we're doing too well here, does it? Starting with every breath we take that's laden with the toxic heavy metal and chemical particulates from climate engineering programs, vaccinations, fluoridation, on and on and on. And Americans seem so far unwilling to respond to the noose that's being tightened around our collective necks. Another headline, climate change is making us sick, top U.S. doctors say. Is it so much climate change, or perhaps let's address climate engineering that's toxifying every single breath we take, contaminating the entire planet, destroying the ozone layer, disrupting the hydrological cycle, which goes back into all the Eurasian countries being toppled, as I just mentioned. So we have this selectively controlled headlines, selective truths, I should say, just like the one I just read about climate change making us sick. Omitting climate engineering. Another headline, Monsanto colluded with EPA. Monsanto was unable to prove Roundup does not cause cancer. Unsealed court documents reveal, as I've said week after week in show after show, organizations like the EPA do not exist to warn the public of threats. They exist to hide those threats from the public and thus serve the power structure paymasters. That's why they exist. And more of this type of truth is coming out. And it's about time the public realize that as they're injecting their children with highly lethal vaccinations, eating genetically modified food that's laden with unimaginable amounts of chemicals, covered up by the EPA. Another headline. For those that think the economy is thriving, that Mr. Trump's going to fix everything, just like those who thought Obama was or Clinton would. All a delusion. 14% of community college students are homeless. No surprise. Only a couple economic headlines here because the bottom line is the environment. All the rest is just a distraction. All the economic news we see about what's going to happen with Social Security, retirement accounts, what the stock market's going to do, that's all a delusion, a total delusion. The only thing that matters is the planet's ability to support life. What could matter more than that? So I don't want to go deeply into the economic headlines, only a couple to point out the fact that it is imploding. As the environment implodes, the economy will follow, and the hyped, inflated stock market is nothing but smoke and mirrors. And all those who don't believe that will find out soon enough how wrong they were. Final economic headline: China is again selling U.S. treasuries as foreign central banks liquidate $45 billion. It's happening. People are battening down the hatches. Other countries are battening down the hatches, if you will. They know it's coming because you can't hide global biosphere implosion. On that note, a weather update: a constant stream of record-breaking high temperatures and record high nighttime low temperatures. Important to understand that because the nighttime low temperatures are rising twice as fast as daytime highs. Why? Because we have a massive greenhouse gas buildup. That greenhouse gas buildup includes methane, which is spewing from all over the globe right now out of thawing methane deposits, out of fracking wells, a lot of other sources. But the seabed methane deposits, the most worrisome of all, massive methane expulsion happening in the Arctic now. That methane migrates to the atmosphere and spreads out, covering the planet like a layer of glass. Thus, the planet can't cool off at night. Temps go up and up and up. Unless, of course, in some locations where there's enough moisture, the climate engineers can cool things down temporarily and toxically like they just did with Winter Storm Stella, the latest engineered atrocity from the global weather makers. And they do this over the most populated regions of the U.S. and other parts of the world to create maximum headlines, thus maximum climate confusion with the population and thus maximum distraction. Disturbingly still, we have too many people in the anti-geoengineering community who claim to be in the anti-geoengineering community that are not acknowledging the fact that storms like Winter Storm Stella are completely and totally engineered. And for those who don't believe this or don't understand it, look at a post I just put up at geoengineeringwatch.org. It's under the top stories and recent columns that covered Winter Storm Stella, in which I captured satellite imagery of a massive stripe of snow that suddenly appeared on the radar screen, crossing warm bands of rain stretching perhaps 200 miles out into the warm Atlantic Ocean. How do you have a perfectly symmetrical stripe of snow that appears in bands of rain on a radar? I captured the animation of the radar as well. You can see it from multiple angles, if you will. This is chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. These materials were laid down in that stripe as they tried to make it snow in New York, but it didn't really work out that well because the moisture is getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and all the chemicals they can dump on that moisture are now not cooling things down or creating the chemically induced snowstorms that the weather makers are trying so hard to manufacture. So here's a headline that covers that. Not quite able to pull that snowstorm off to the degree that they told us. Here's the headline: National Weather Service accused of knowingly misleading the public. From that report, the National Weather Service is denying accusations it knowingly misled the public with its blizzard forecast this week for New York. Who does the modeling for the National Weather Service? By the way, the National Weather Service and NOAA has illegal federal gag orders on all their employees because they don't want anything to get out that would bring geoengineering to the light of day. In addition to the gag order, who does the modeling for National Weather Service and NOAA? Raytheon, private defense contractor Raytheon, that's in up to their neck in the climate engineering insanity. Foxes running the hen house and everybody in that house gagged with illegal federal gag orders. Such misleading reporting regarding the Weather Channel and the climate is constant. For example, the California rain scenario included with this misreporting. California has received much more rain this year as compared to years during the last decade. But has the rain really been biblical in proportions? Absolutely not. Though some lower level locations have received above normal rain, and though some flooding has occurred, exponentially higher rainfall amounts that should have occurred over mountainous regions is in so many cases not happening. Not saying everywhere, but you have substantial chemically nucleated snow deposits in the Sierra. But why isn't it happening the orographically enhanced rainfall over some of the mountainous areas? Because storm systems are being saturated with geoengineering aerosols, because the same storm systems are also being blasted with extremely high levels of microwave transmissions, which are used to manipulate the atmospheric aerosols. All of these processes are used for geoengineering purposes to play God with the weather, to migrate moisture to wherever the weather makers want it. So, in summary, though significant rain has fallen in much of California this year, a great deal of it has come in the form of a constant drip drip under a featureless canopy of geoengineered skies. That's the reality. How often now we have dry, completely cloud-covered skies, featureless, and if you're in a quiet location, all you can hear overhead is aircraft, thickening up that blanket of aerosols, solar radiation management, specific purpose to block the sun. Has this rain that we have gotten in California now, has it done any good for the catastrophic die-off of California's forests? No, not much good at all. Rain does little good for the trees when it's filled with bioavailable toxic metals, starting with aluminum. And this is not speculation, theory, or conjecture. We have dozens of lab tests of precipitation to prove it's filled with bioavailable aluminum. Peer-reviewed study proves that this material destroys root systems and stops nutrient uptake. Trees will continue to die so long as geoengineering carries on. Water in Lake Shasta and even Lake Oroville. Does anybody wonder why Lake Oroville overflowed when suddenly they were able to let 50 feet out of the lake through the bottom? Why did they ever let it get to the point where it overflowed onto a spillway they knew was damaged? Why? Created a lot of headlines, a lot of fear, and a lot of theater about what could happen in these biblical rains in California, which is not the case. Yes, we've had a lot of rain. Yes, there's been some flooding, but it's been a constant drip, drip. There's not the sweeping, driving, constant winds and squalls. So often, with some exceptions, it's just a drip, drip, drip. And in Lake Shasta now, it's about 30 to 40 feet down when it was full. Why? And will we get enough rain to fill it back up? Why would they let so much water out of the lake when we've had such a bad drought? Why would they flush it downriver and lower that lake so much? And if that lake doesn't fill up again this year, a lot of people should have a lot of questions to answer. On to more headlines. So much to cover today. I'll do my best. Scientists question the safety of untested 5G technology at an international conference. How many people are even concerned about what's going right through their body? These frequency transmissions that we know go through walls, glass, metal, of course they're going through us. And how many Americans, how many people around the globe even question this? From this headline, research studies presented at an international conference revealed that the same electromagnetic frequencies used for crowd control weapons form the foundation of the latest network branded as 5G. Shouldn't that concern us? Why wouldn't that concern us? Why wouldn't that concern any reasonable human being? Continuing from the report, these frequencies will tie together more than 50 billion devices as part of the internet. Current investigations of wireless frequencies in the multimeter and sub-millimeter range confirm that these waves interact directly with human skin, specifically the sweat glands. Dr. Ben Ishaya of the Department of Physics in the Hebrew University of Israel recently detailed how human sweat ducts act like an array of helical antennas when exposed to these 5G wavelengths. Scientists caution that before rolling out 5G technologies that use these frequencies, research on human health effects should be done to ensure the public and environment are protected. Do you think that would make sense? How can this not be horrifically harmful? Where is the human race's sense of reason? And it comes down to the public. We know those in power are going to carry on with this type of insanity, but it comes down to an apathetic public that seems willing to be frogs in boiling water, and that's exactly what we are right now. More headlines on that note. From the Energy News Network, experts warn of collapse at Fukushima reactor. We know they've blown up. Now we're talking about collapse of the fuel pools. Quote, "It will be the end of Japan. New photos show serious structural damage at Unit 2, and, quote, it's a fantasy that they can decommission this plant." This is from AP. Melted fuel has broken pieces of structure in containment vessel. The following quote is from one of the top nuclear danger experts on the planet, Helen Caldicott. This is what she said. "A huge amount of radiation could be released, such that it would be the end of Japan and certainly very much radioactive fallout in the northern hemisphere, such that I would probably get my family from Boston to come straight away to Australia. That quote from one of the most recognized nuclear danger experts on the planet. Another story corporate media is not telling us. More headlines. Amazon jungle faces death spiral of drought and deforestation, warn scientists. When you fill the atmosphere with light-scattering, drought-inducing particulates, i.e. climate engineering, and yes, we still have deluges in area, you can't uniformly block a buildup of rainfall on a rapidly warming planet. You're going to have areas of tremendous deluge, but overall, countless zones of drought are created when you cover the planet with this membrane, this canopy of light-scattering, drought-inducing particles, toxic particles. So we have massive drought in the Amazon, one of the primary oxygen-producing zones on the planet. And these areas are disintegrating. And they feed on themselves. It's called a feedback loop. From that report, more droughts can lead to less forest, leading to more droughts, and so on. People assume that trees exist in areas where rain falls. But in fact, to a large degree, the opposite is true. Rain falls where trees exist. The system is much more complex than people assume. We are destroying our planet on countless levels, and climate engineering, not the only cause. Countless anthropogenic causes. We've decimated our planet. But climate engineering is the most direct assault on the web of life ever launched by the human race. Another headline. Almost 500,000 acres, 75% of Clark County, Kansas, burned in wildfires. One person dead with up to 9,000 cattle killed. Not much media coverage of that. They focused more on things like Winter Storm Stella to convince populations that the planet is cold when it was really superheating. Now, let's take a critical look. This is very important, what's happening to Earth's oceans. And as I've stated so many times in previous shows, previous disseminations, if the seas die, we die. Very, very simple. Listen carefully to these headlines. Consider the ramifications. Here's one. Naval exercises add trillions of pieces of plastic debris to oceans. The military-industrial complex has no regard for the web of life. They're a cancer that will continue to try to proliferate at any cost until it destroys our host, planet Earth. That's what cancers do. From that report, for the next 2 decades, the U.S. Navy will inject hundreds of thousands of pounds of flares and billions of metal-coated glass fibers into ocean waters off the coasts of Washington and Oregon. I want to remind listeners, this is on top of the use of depleted uranium, highly radioactive ammunition being used for practice off the same coasts and all around the world. No regard for the web of life. Continuing from this report, when the last 2 decades are added in, the Navy will have left behind more than 500,000 pounds of flares, trillions of microfibers, which are radar countermeasures dropped by aircraft, all accumulating in our seas. Additionally, as Truth Out, that's where this report came from, my thanks to them, previously reported upcoming naval exercises will inject 20,000 tons of heavy metals and explosives into the same seas. These shocking numbers are due to a widespread domestic military expansion, which entails a dramatic uptick in the number of naval training exercises conducted each year. So if you're one of the people that drives around with the flags hanging off your cars, blindly supporting anything the military-industrial complex cancer does, you're a part of the problem. You're absolutely a part of the problem, and I'm asking you to please wake up and understand there's much more to being patriotic than blindly and unquestioningly waving your flag around. Much more to it. I'm not saying other governments are not corrupt. They are. They absolutely are. But let's take the log out of our eye before we try to criticize anybody else. If we don't deal with the largest military on the planet, exponentially the largest, bigger than the next 10 militaries combined, if we don't deal with that and rein it in, as Eisenhower warned us about so long ago, it's the end of the road. And geoengineering, climate engineering, what's happening above our heads, directly connected to all of this. Another headline. The Navy, listen closely to all these headlines, by the way, dealing with what's happening to our oceans. Oceans die, we die. All of this weaves back into geoengineering at the end. Please listen carefully. I'll try to weave this together. The Navy claims its ramped up activity will have no significant impacts. How is that possible? How can the Navy claim that dropping depleted uranium in the oceans, highly radioactive, dumping all these other toxins, they dump their trash, they dump their waste, they dump everything into the oceans. So do cruise ships. We treat our oceans like a toilet, or rather like a toxic waste dump. And yet the Navy states that all this activity will have no significant impacts. And any that can't recognize a blatant, glaring lie like that needs to seriously recheck their reality. As I get on to more headlines, I want to make an important statement, and I hope it's remembered and considered. My primary goal is to expose and halt the ongoing global climate engineering insanity. When the criminals in Washington, criminals of any political party, engage in actions that make it clear they are a core part of the powers behind the climate engineering insanity, I will focus on what they're doing while explaining why it matters. To justly criticize the current administration is not in any way an expression of support for past administrations or other presidential candidates. All of them are criminals: Clinton, Obama, Bush's, and the rest. So for the dichotomous thinking individuals that convince themselves that criticism of Trump is somehow showing support for the Clintons or Obama, no, you are wrong. In any such conclusion, you are wrong. It's completely and totally false. I'm simply leveling criticism where it deserves to be with the current administration, which is the one we are dealing with now. A memo from the Department of the Interior, Secretary Zinke announces proposed 73 million acre oil and natural gas lease sale for the Gulf of Mexico. From that report, U.S. Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke today announced that the department will offer 73 million acres offshore Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida for oil and gas exploration and development. The proposed region-wide lease sale scheduled for August 16, 2017 would include all available unleased areas in federal waters off the Gulf of Mexico. Opening more federal lands and waters to oil and gas drilling is a pillar of President Trump's plan to make the United States, quote, energy independent, Secretary Zinke said. The Gulf is a vital part of that strategy to spur economic opportunities for industry, states, and local communities to create jobs and homegrown energy to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. How much good will any of that do us on a dead planet? If the oceans die, we die. They are virtually opening the floodgates for total pillaging, plundering, and mass destruction of what's left of our oceans, and that's what this administration is about. This is completely unbridled insanity. Our oceans are near dead already. We're heading toward Canfield Ocean, a lifeless, oxygenless, stratified ocean. And this type of action being taken by this administration should alarm any sane person that understands how severe our planet's implosion is at this moment. Let's continue. I'm not done yet. Opening Arctic for drilling is Trump priority, key senator says. From that report, Senator Lisa Murkowski stated President Donald Trump is interested in opening up new coastal waters for oil and gas drilling and reversing Obama-era policies that restrict energy development in Alaska. Not an Obama fan. Of course not. Huge part of the problem. So is Clinton. I'll state it over and over. That has nothing to do with what Trump and his team of fascists are doing right now. They will destroy what's left of Earth's life support systems. And if we, as the people, do not stand up and stop this, we have ourselves to blame. Continuing from that report, both Trump and the Interior Secretary, again, Ryan Zinke, are weighing ways to expand opportunities or destruction. We should rephrase that. To drill in the Arctic waters. Though the changes could take years to accomplish administratively, Murkowski said in an interview on the sidelines at a conference in Houston. She said this: it's fair to say we are looking at how the administration might be able to allow for opportunities within this important area offshore Alaska. Opportunities. Let's expand and completely decimate the planet until we all die. Isn't that what we're talking about here ultimately? And for those who think that environmentalists are misguided in some way, no environment, no people. And I will say the environmentalist communities, as I stated over and over, are very disappointingly ignoring the single greatest environmental assault of all, climate engineering, and I hope that changes. But for those who have shown unimaginable contempt for the environment, no people, very simple. More headlines. Trump expected to announce rollback of auto emission standards. It goes on and on. Complete gutting of any environmental protection at all. That's what this administration and the fascists who support it are about. Trump set to roll back federal fuel economy requirements. More of the same. From CNBC, another headline. Trump's EPA chief, Scott Pruitt, says carbon dioxide is not a primary contributor to global warming. And we have a lot of people in the anti-geoengineering community who jump all over that. How about some facts? I don't want anybody to believe what I state, but what do people think keeps the planet warm? We're a ball of rock in a very hostile environment. What do they think keeps the planet warm? And if you disrupt that energy balance, that blanket of gases that allows us to live here, what's going to happen? Nothing good. So when we have people that truly don't have a clue or don't want a clue because they work for those who profit off the destruction of the planet, this is the sort of thing you would expect them to say. From that report, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt said Thursday he does not believe carbon dioxide is a primary contributor to global warming. It's not about what we believe. And what about methane, Mr. Pruitt? Is that good for us also or not a problem? Tell the oceans. Back to my original theme here. Tell the oceans that CO2 is not a problem. I'll get to more of that in a moment. The oceans that are acidifying to a degree that is killing the oceans everywhere. Tell the oceans it's not a problem. Finishing that report from Mr. Pruitt, I think that measuring with precision human activity on the climate is something very challenging to do, and there's a tremendous disagreement about the degree of impact. So, no, I would not agree that it's a primary contributor to the global warming that we see. He told CNBC. No, there's not a lot of disagreement, Mr. Pruitt. There's only a few paid liars who are given an equal weight on the scale. Liars that work for, in every case, fossil fuel industry, which is connected to the military-industrial complex, which are connected to the climate engineers who are creating storms like Winter Storm Stella to confuse the population about the true severity of climate damage already done. Temporary toxic cooldowns at the cost of an even worse global warming. Let's continue with headlines. Trump to drop climate change from environmental reviews. No surprise. If you eliminate any way of the climate scientists getting real data out to the public, you cover the tracks of how bad the climate is already damaged. From this report from Reuters, President Donald Trump is set to sign an order to greatly reduce the role of climate change plays in decision-making across the U.S. government. Bloomberg reported this also, citing a person familiar with the administration's plan. The order will also involve a reconsideration of the government's use of a metric known as social cost of carbon, which weighs the potential economic damage from climate change. What does that mean? It means that what Trump is doing is trying to completely erase the fact that the activities of the fossil fuel industry are decimating the planet, for which we all pay the price. But he doesn't want the fossil fuel industry to in any way consider that price, the price of a dead planet. That's where we're headed. Another headline. Let's continue this theme. Donald Trump's cabinet is the richest in U.S. history, historians say. Why is that a surprise? It isn't a surprise. Trump's cabinet is stacked with billionaires. Billionaires that have made their profit off the looting, plundering, and pillaging of Earth's natural resources in countries all over the world using the military-industrial complex as a hammer. This equation does not bode well for what's left of the biosphere, because they now clearly intend to sack the remaining resources on the planet until nothing is left. That's exactly where we're heading at blinding speed. Another headline, Pentagon spending spree for February 2017. Nearly $30 billion of new defense industry contracts have been signed. An absolute free-for-all of insanity is going on right now. And this is why empires always fail and collapse. But now We're talking about global collapse, not just one country. Global collapse. It's happening all over the world. Other governments have done the same to the environment, not just picking on our government. China's a total disaster. Russia's a total disaster. Brazil, everywhere. I could go on and on. Every country, every government is decimating Earth's natural systems, but no one as much as the United States of America. That's a statistical fact. We use exponentially more resources than any other country per capita. Exponentially more. Those who deny that should do some real investigation. Let's continue with more headlines. The fossil fuel industry's invisible colonization of academia. How do we have so many scientists that are willing to lie, to say whatever they're told or paid to say, or deny whatever they're told or paid to deny, like the whole of academia that denies the climate engineering elephant in the room over our heads every single day? Because these industries, this form of fascism that we face now, and many people confuse what form of government this really is, that's what we really have. And they have taken control of universities, of academia, if you will. They literally have. Unless they put their blessing on any study, the study doesn't go anywhere. The truth can't be released to the population. They can't afford that. So thus they've long since taken control of universities, scientific organizations, and so forth. And now we have fossil fuel industry funded pseudoscience to dispute any real science that might be trying to come to the light of day. Another headline. Report shows the oil industry benefits from, listen to this, 5.3 trillion in subsidies annually. Not million or billion, trillion. From that report, it is the effects of pouring billions of tons of climate-changing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere that accounts for nearly 3/4 of the final 5.3 trillion annual figure arrived at by IMF researchers. Now, they're not including climate engineering, of course, in this equation because they're not allowed to. So let's all consider that that is absolutely a massive part of this equation. It's not just greenhouse gases destroying the climate system and the biosphere. It is also climate engineering, which is never mentioned in articles like this, but let's assume we know it's there. Continuing, according to a statement from Benedict Clements representing the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, quote, while the large size of our new estimates may be surprising, it is important to put in perspective just how many health problems are linked to energy consumption and air quality. Let's stop there. The single greatest contributor to lethal microscopic atmospheric particulates is climate engineering. The expressed goal of putting 20 million tons of aluminum nanoparticulates into the atmosphere annually, stated by the world's most recognized climate engineer, David Keith. So this elephant in the room of climate engineering, again, not mentioned when we know people are dying rapidly all over the globe from atmospheric particulates being sprayed out of jet aircraft, which film footage proves, government documents prove, lab tests prove, mountains and mountains and mountains of data. This is going on above our heads, and our own sense of reason should make clear to us that obviously this is going on. You can't have grid patterns one day, horizon to horizon trails one day, and nothing the next. Film footage of aircraft turning on and off. We have photographs of retrofit nozzles mounted on the pylons aimed into the exhaust jet stream to make it look like quote-unquote condensation. Any who choose to objectively examine the facts regarding climate engineering can only conclude it's absolutely going on and has been for 7 decades. So people are dying all over the globe from the air quality. Continuing from this report, according to conservative estimates, the World Health Organization, WHO, 1 in 8 global deaths are attributable just to air pollution. Obviously, this does not include deaths from drought-related food shortages, lack of water, extreme and deadly weather events, or any other consequences of anthropogenic global climate change caused by burning of fossil fuels. And let me add to this report, climate engineering, deliberate global climate intervention programs, and you cannot have any legitimate discussion about the climate without including the climate engineering programs. So if we look at what this report shows, oil industry benefits from 5.3 trillion in subsidies annually. How much of that money or other monies we don't even know about are going to the constant spraying of our atmosphere from climate engineering? Trump has just stated in a national speech quote, "We will start a new industrial revolution." And I have a question for Mr. Trump. How far will your new industrial revolution get when the current militarized, industrialized revolution that we're still in has pushed us to within a decade of total global omnicide? And that's what will happen if we remain on the current course. And you're talking about ramping it up, Mr. Trump? How much of the human race is living in a world of total delusion and denial and willful blindness at this point? The current course is a path to certain near-term omnicide. That's a mathematical fact. Another headline: Trump makes 9th golf course visit in 7 weeks in office. These people aren't about the common good. If he took his job seriously, that would not be the case. From that report, President Trump paid a visit to one of his golf courses again Saturday, marking apparently his 9th visit to a golf course in the 7 weeks since he took office. I want to state this again. Just and deserved criticism of Mr. Trump is in no way endorsing the Clinton crime cabal or the Bush crime family or the Obamas or any other administration. It's simply giving criticism where criticism is due. One more headline: blame the Pentagon and the CIA for Trump's immigration ban. We have a government that has fomented violence overseas by invading other countries, toppling them, as I've gone over again and again, droughting them out, destabilizing their nations, invading them. Is it any wonder that there's animosity around the globe? Then we have 9/11 in order to galvanize the American public into supporting what our government has done overseas, which has created this violence to begin with. And the government that claims that people in other countries hate us for our freedom and our democracy, is this really true? Why aren't countries like Switzerland, for example? Switzerland is not being attacked or assaulted in the way America is. Switzerland's not invading other countries or doing what we're doing in other countries. People in other countries don't have animosity toward America because of our freedom and democracy here. And can we call this a democracy? Anybody who used that term for what the circumstances we live in now, an increasing police state, that's not the appropriate term. But they feel this animosity because of what our country has done in other countries, and our government, the shadow government that truly runs our country, needs to continue to foment this animosity because it fuels the military-industrial complex, period. So Trump's immigration ban that he blames on people that just have different religious beliefs, and I'm not advocating fundamental Islam, of course not. That's very dangerous. But is that what it's really about? No, it's about the people in these countries that are now, in many cases, refugees. Their nations completely bombed out and razed to the ground. And of course, banning them now from coming over and blaming it on them hating our freedom and democracy is the card the power structure will play. And that's not what it's about. That's what I'm saying. Not what it's about. Anyone who truly cares about the truth will examine the facts relating to what our country has done and is doing in other countries around the globe in order to further the agenda of the corporate world and the military-industrial complex. I want to weave this back into the oceans because that's the theme that matters right now on this show and with everything that the Trump administration is doing to hide data that would possibly wake the public up to just how severely the oceans are being damaged. Now, for those who remember what I read earlier in this show, what I went over about the EPA director's statement that carbon is not a problem, CO2 is not a problem. Here's a headline from the Smithsonian Institute. Human pollution may be fertilizing the oceans, and that's not a good thing. That's what I've been saying over and over. Oceans are becoming highly acidic. They're dying. From that report, scientists now understand that they have underestimated how the carbon and methane emissions from our cars, livestock, and electricity use are helping to drive dramatic shifts in our oceans. And let's get back to climate engineering as well. Always omitted from any mainstream source. That's their job. But they're just beginning to untangle the effects of some of the other pollutants we produce. For instance, iron emissions from coal burning and steel smelting could actually be helping the oceans to suck up more atmospheric carbon, according to new research. I've stated this in previous shows, I've done articles on it, and I've covered it in disseminations. Part of the climate engineering insanity is called ocean fertilization. forcing the oceans to uptake some of the carbon in a desperate and destructive attempt to hide the problem from the population as long as possible. So when we have aircraft spraying over the oceans, what satellite imagery proves conclusively beyond doubt, these materials appear to also be designed to trigger ocean fertilization, the causing of plankton blooms to suck up some of that carbon, pull it into the oceans. It kills that section of the ocean, but the climate engineers, the power structure, the shadow government don't care. They don't care about the consequences of their actions. They only care about keeping a handle on their power until the bitter, brutal end. And that's where we're heading. Just like a drug addict will not stop the use of those drugs because they're addicted. Those addicted to power will not stop what they're doing unless we stand up, expose them, and stop these programs from the inside out by bringing to the attention of our military brothers and sisters that they are assisting in, facilitating global planetary omnicide, which will kill them, which will kill their children, along with the rest of us. It's up to us, the public, the population, to prioritize, help us expose what's really going on around the globe, help us to wake up our military brothers and sisters that we might have some chance at stopping the military-industrial shadow government complex cancer from consuming what's yet left of the planet. This is happening now. Ocean iron fertilization now acknowledged, what we have said at GeoEngineeringWatch.org for a very long time. Another headline. New scientific study suggests ocean acidification rate unparalleled in last 300 million years. For those people who choose to falsely believe that what's happening on Earth now is somehow natural, truly, you are disconnected from reality. Completely disconnected from reality. There's nothing natural about what our species has done to this planet. And now we have science study that proves it hasn't happened in at least 300 million years. So let's look at this statistically. We already have statisticians that have calculated the statistical odds of the current changes in warming, acidification, and so forth in any way being natural. And those odds are statistically zero. It can't be possible that you can do what we've done to the planet and not have very bad results. How can you put 20 million years of stored hydrocarbon back into the atmosphere, not have a bad result? How can you burn, cut down, and poison the forests of the globe and not have a bad result? How can we completely pollute the oceans, killing them, destroying the ozone layer with climate engineering, and thus releasing immense UV radiation on the Earth's plankton populations, killing them, plankton producing most of Earth's oxygen? How can we do all of these things and not have a very, very bad result? So now we have statistically that what's happening in our oceans, the ocean acidification, which President Trump's EPA appointee stating not a problem, that CO2 is not a problem, and yet we have all available facts, all available science data flying in the face of such an incredibly absurd statement that's obviously linked to the fossil fuel industry, military industrial complex, which is connected to the climate engineering complex, which all are joined at the hip with the medical industrial complex. And if we remain on the current course, very soon the human race and all life on Earth will pay the price. More headlines. I'm running out of time. From Energy News again, massive die-offs reported in Pacific Ocean. Officials say no fish out there anywhere over a very large area. Quote, what's happening? Where's their food? Alarming, frightening. Those are quotes from the article. Total failure in reproduction like nothing we've ever observed before. This is happening now. Another headline, rate of ocean warming quadrupled since 20th century study reveals. 4 times faster. From that report, the buildup of heat-trapping greenhouse gases is warming the upper oceans 4 times faster than during the period from 1960 to 1990, according to new research. Everything is exponential. That's what is most important to understand in the converging cataclysms we face. Completely non-linear equation, accelerating exponentially. We are very close to hitting the wall. The human race and life on Earth, if we do not change course, there will be nothing left to salvage, and statistics back this up. More headlines. Trump's cuts to NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, could impede tracking of sea die-off and sea level rise. No surprise. Sweep it under the rug, hide it as long as you can, just like the use of Corexit in the Gulf of Mexico. Hide it from the population to avoid panicking the population until the last possible moment. Another headline, the U.S. is about to lose $1 trillion in coastal property values. If you wonder why they're trying to hide things, that's one of the reasons. That's from Think Progress. From that report, both the Arctic and the Antarctic keep smashing records for ice loss and heat, providing more evidence we are headed for the worst-case scenario of sea level rise, happening exponentially faster than all previous worst-case scenario predictions. Another headline, Arabian sea algae blooms caused by climate change killing fish and threatening economy. Back to the economy. No environment, no economy. That's simple. The economic collapse of the current system is very close and absolutely inevitable. As the biosphere implodes, the economy will crash completely. There will be no hiding that for much longer. That's why the power structure is so desperate. That's why they're pushing toward global conflict, because they have no other cards to play. Listen to this headline. Obama quietly promoted climate engineering research before leaving the White House. That should be no surprise from that report. The U.S. Global Change Research Program aims to provide a roadmap for government research into climate change, and in January urged review of geoengineering techniques and their consequences. Why is that a surprise? When you try to completely intervene in Earth's life support systems, you get a very bad result. Obama administration diving into this, the headline not acknowledging it's been going on for 70 years already. But more and more of this type of truth is coming to light. Another headline from NBC News, climate engineering, quote, scary idea. But it says it should be tried out, from NBC. Getting very hard to hide what's happening in our skies. From that report, it's time to study and maybe even test the idea of cooling Earth by injecting pollution high into the air to reflect the sun's heat. A first-of-its-kind federal science report said Tuesday. Continuing, the idea was once considered fringe to purposely re-engineer the planet's climate as a last-ditch effort to battle global warming with artificial cloud cover. No longer. In a nuanced 2-volume report, the National Academy of Sciences said that the concept should not be acted upon immediately because it's too risky, but it should be studied and perhaps tested outdoors. They're trying to slowly bring this to light. Will the population buy it? When will the population understand that when the Earth's ability to support life is completely derailed, that's the end of the road? And we have article after article that our local media does not touch, will not touch, as we saw from activists filming in front of KRCR in Reading, the Channel 7 ABC News, stating they will never cover this issue. Is that not criminal censorship? Censorship of lethal threats to the public being blocked out by our local media, who refuses to cover any event, even events drawing 1,000 people or more with experts from around the country, and they refuse to cover it because that's what they're paid to do. Hide reality. Hide the threat from the population as long as possible, and too many in our citizenry want to keep their heads in the sand. If you care about your children, if you care about their futures, if you care about your own future, it's time to wake up. What will each of us choose to do about the darkening horizon? That's the question. Will we allow the power structure programming to keep us convinced that we have no say in the matter? Will we allow this power structure programming to convince us that we have no personal power to alter the equation for the better? Or will we choose to break the bonds of defeatism and face the fact that each and every one of us can and must fully exercise the power we possess? Will we choose to forge forward in this most critical fight for the greater good by learning how to efficiently and effectively share credible information with all those in our circles and then ask them to do the same? If the greater population can be fully awakened to the fact that we are literally under direct assault from the power structure, and all those who support it, if we can expose this, we can change the world while there's yet something left to salvage of Earth's life support systems. Go to the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for very detailed activist instructions. Make your voice heard. Until next week, This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org.
the Anti-Media Radio. Your host Nick Burnaby here on UCY.